So recently I read a new book that was not actually geared towards homeschoolers, but towards the public school system and some of the fundamental flaws in that system. But it was really thought-provoking and really intriguing, made me chew on some things and question how I want to approach a few things in my own homeschool. And so I want to share those with you today. So welcome, and thanks for joining me. Like I said, this book was not written to or for homeschoolers. This really was written about the public school system and the problems in it. However, he is a big proponent of families and homeschooling within this. And when I was reading it, it was challenging because I was reading some of the problems with the schooling system. And I kept thinking like, oh, am I doing this? Am I doing this? And then I kept realizing I'm not the target audience that he's talking to. I'm homeschooling. But at the same time, it did make me stop and think, like, what are some of the things in the public school system that are problematic that I might be adapting into my schooling just because it's what we're familiar with in this society? And so I thought I would share a few thoughts that came from this book that have changed just a few aspects of how I want to approach homeschooling. So I heard of this book from Lilani with Living with Eve, and I will put the 2 videos that I've watched of hers that reference this book down in the description below, so check those out because she talks about some different aspects of this book, coming at it from a little bit of a different angle, and so you might enjoy watching those as well. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this, but let me go ahead and share. And I did make some notes because I wanted to remember some of the things that I had read, and I will read a few quotes directly from the book. If you are interested in this book, I mean, I would recommend a read. I don't necessarily agree, or I'm not a proponent of everything he says in the book, so I'm not like giving it this like I agree with everything, but it is very thought-provoking. And if you are on the fence about public schooling or homeschooling, it might really be a tipping point for you, just as you kind of think of some new things, because it brought up some things that I haven't thought about in regard to public schooling versus homeschooling. And I've been in this world since I was homeschooled from kindergarten through 12, so I've heard a lot of arguments. But this wasn't really an argument for homeschooling so much as some things about public school that I hadn't really thought about. So with that, let me go ahead and talk about it. I really think another title for this book could be Education versus Schooling, because he talks a lot about how education and schooling in our society are not the same thing. You can be schooled and completely uneducated when you're done, and you can get yourself a great education without going to school. And so he really emphasizes the difference and how we use them synonymously, but they're not actually synonymous. So that was in and of itself thought-provoking of am I trying to school my children or educate them? And coming at that, whichever way you're coming at that, it does kind of change the way you approach it. But without further ado, the first thought that it challenged me on and that kind of made me think about was, it made me think that I don't want to use timers in my school. Let me explain. Not that I will never use a timer, but I don't want to be driven by timers or by timing, let's say. I'm a very scheduled oriented person. I like things neatly put in their boxes. Maybe it's slightly type A, I don't know. But I think that there is some danger in that. And so I want to read a quote that where he's talking about how the school system is teaching some problematic thoughts because they're being run by time and class time and the bell time and what's wrong. So I just want to read a couple of quotes. These are not, there's a few sentences throughout this paragraph that I'm going to read as one, but they're kind of mixed in. So he's talking about his approach. He was a public school teacher for many years. And so he's talking about what he taught them, the problems that their system taught. And he said, the third lesson we teach is indifference. I teach children not to care too much about anything. When the bell rings, I insist that they drop whatever they are doing and proceed quickly to the next workstation. Nothing important is ever finished in my class. Indeed, the lesson of the bell is that no work is worth finishing, so why care too deeply about anything? And I read that and I went, oh, that hadn't even occurred to me that when we're timing everything and when we're making it, our reading lesson is 20 minutes long, when the timer goes off, we're done. In some ways, we are emphasizing to our children that this isn't important enough to keep going to the end of what we're doing versus just stopping in the middle. And don't get too involved. Don't enjoy it too much because we're going to stop at 20 minutes. And just the thought of being run by timers and timing and schedule being the most important, you are teaching your children that nothing is worth the extra time. You are teaching your children not to get invested because you're just going to stop when it's time to stop. And not that it's not good to have a schedule, but it did make me stop and think, if my children are really invested in enjoying something, and am I going to let them be invested and enjoy and continue educating themselves in that area, or I'm going to make a stop because it's time to stop so that we can complete all our other subjects? Or can I be flexible and let them continue that, and then the next day not do that subject as much and focus on something else? And again, not that I'm anti-schedule, because I'm not, and not that I'm saying don't get all your subjects done one day, because I'm not, but it challenged me because I tend to be the kind of person who puts things where they need to be, and we're going to get things done this way, versus let my children enjoy the process of education and get interested in things, but also teach children that we finish what we begin. We don't just, the time's over, so we're done whether or not it's worth, but we can actually complete something. So practically for me right now, I'm teaching my child to read. It means that instead of putting a timer on for 20 minutes and we stop when it's done, I come to reading with the mindset, okay, we got about 20 minutes worth of time. I keep an eye on the clock, and when we're getting near that 20-minute mark, I find a completion spot, a spot where the break is natural and easy and where we finished, or I pay attention to if my child's really enjoying the lesson that day. Maybe we go a little longer. But it's not me eliminating the, oh, this is a 20-minute time slot. It's just changing the way I come to it, I suppose. Thought 2 is teaching self-dependence and confidence. And the point that I have for this is that we don't, as a society, leave our children alone with a problem to solve it. And so again, I want to read a quote from his book. So he talks about, in the system of public school, we never place the child alone in an unguided setting with a problem to solve. And then he talks about sometimes the problem is fraught with great risks, such as the problem of galloping a horse or making it jump. But that, of course, is a problem successfully solved by thousands of children before the age of 10. Can you imagine anyone who has mastered such a challenge ever lacking confidence in his ability to do anything? So he's talking about we help our child through everything. And again, I'm a proponent of helping your child when they need help. But being intentional about giving them things that they can overcome themselves. And maybe this isn't in the day-to-day class so much as just being aware as a parent and in life that you're giving them opportunities to overcome things and take challenges and win those challenges themselves and gain their own sense of self-confidence. But we do tend to hover and we do tend to help. And again, I'm not saying don't help your child when they need it or when they ask for it, because children will ask for help when they need it. But be intentional about giving your children things and time alone to accomplish things themselves, so that not everything is handed to them or done for them, but so that they learn how to challenge themselves and how to do hard things and then feel that rush of, wow, I did it. And so again, maybe that one for me, I wouldn't necessarily say so challenging in the homeschool as just the way I approach my children at home and being intentional about giving them some of those, just some of those challenges and being aware of which ones I help them with and which ones I hand them to do themselves. The third point that I would say is the biggest one for me is, what is education about? What is the point of education? And his argument in this book is that the point of education is to teach your children that education means money. You get a good education, so you get a good job, so you get good money. Like that's the structure of education that we have. And if you don't get a good education, then you can't have good money when you're older. And so he says that we're teaching our children to view education as a means for money. He argues that that is not a good view of education. It's not. That's not the purpose of education. And he has a quote here that says, whatever an education is, it should make you a unique individual, not a conformist. And the later says, it should teach you what is important, how to live and how to die. Like, education is not about making a good job and getting money. And I get that's a bonus of having a good education, but we should be educating our children for far more than make a lot of money. Teaching them how to live their life well and how to die their life well. Like, that is what their life is. Teach them how to engage it in the best manner possible. And so I just wrote down some notes that it should teach you how to be the best you can possibly be. How to succeed for me, because we are Christians and we follow God. How to succeed in following God and using your given talents to their fullest. Like, I should be educating my children with that in mind. How to live and how to die well. How to pursue what God has interested you in. And so, like, education is so much bigger than a dollar sign at the end of the day. But with that, I would say education is a stepping stone in teaching your child how to achieve those things that I just listed, how to achieve a good life, how to achieve the relationship with God, how to use the talents and the skills and the brain that God has given you to live a full and successful, not necessarily in relation to the dollar, but a successful and whole life. And so education is a tool in that basket. It's not the end all, but in that, it got me thinking, well, if that's how I want to approach education, how do each of the subjects that I'm teaching my children apply to living a full and good life? And so I actually went and thought about each subject and what the purpose, what skill, what mindset it helps your child develop toward living a full life. And so I'll just read off kind of just some of my thoughts that I wrote down. These aren't complete or perfect, but there's some thoughts. So science and math. They give an understanding of how our world works, what things are made of and how they function. They teach cause and effect. They teach facts, what is, and play into logic and reasoning. And those are tools in the tool basket of life. And so those are some ways that science and math, aside from a profession that demands those are some of the skills that it gives your child to living a good life. History is an understanding of how mankind works. It teaches us to learn from the past and what we've done, what we failed, and our successes. It teaches us from our past successes and failures. Geography is an understanding of how the earth is physically laid out. It is also an understanding of how other cultures function, how humankind is the same all over the world, but also very different all over the world. So an understanding of humankind as well as an understanding of like the physical, geographical layout of the earth. And then I wrote that language arts is understanding how to use language and communication to their fullest, an excellent skill for somebody to succeed in life with. And so, again, those aren't like complete or perfect synopsis. Maybe not every subject is covered, but just got me thinking that the way I'm approaching these subjects will affect the way I teach them, and the way I teach them will affect what my child gains from them and what they see that I value as important. And so none of these subjects or skills is an end unto themselves, but they're skills to help your child live a more full and complete and qualified life. And I think that knowing my goals for each of those subjects is important, and it will affect the way I come at them. So that was kind of my third thought that I gained from this book. I would encourage you to read it if you have an interest in it and have the time to. It's not a very long book, and it was well written. It wasn't really dry. I didn't feel like I was plodding through. Some books that are more informational are definitely very dry and hard to get through. This was not one of those. If you do not want to be challenged on the way of the public school system, do not read this book. Just move on. If you're waffling of public school homeschool, this book might be interesting to you. You might have some new thoughts. And if, like me, you're like confirmed homeschooler who's never considered anything else, it just challenged, again, the way I think about my homeschool and how I perceive public school and what I'm meshing in and what I'm not, and what things I want to avoid in the problems that I think that they have created in the public school system. So again, just a really interesting, thought-provoking, just made me chew on things for a while, and I still am, and I'm going to reread it. I borrowed the book from the library because I was like, I'm not really sure, and then I read the book, or I read about a few chapters, and I went, I'm going to buy it, and I bought it because I want to have it, because I think it's a really good resource. So I know that didn't give you really a full synopsis of the book, but see if your library has it if you're interested, and let me know your thoughts down below.